Hi, I'm Allison Wilkes, and today I am happy to be discussing with you the research that I've done for this course. Today we will be looking at and discussing communication accommodation theory. To do so, we will begin by first looking at the origination of the theory itself and its theorist, and then we'll get a crash course on the developments and the structure of the theory. After that, we will discuss two specific case studies in which the theory was used to conduct research of the researchers themselves. Then we will look at some limitations and ideas for future research and have some concluding thoughts. So let's begin. Communication accommodation theory was developed by Howard Giles. This theory was first known as speech accommodation theory, and that is because the first research in this sort of area, as our textbook explains, was done by Labov, as he was looking at different dialects inside same environments where there are different cultures and how these cultures interacted with each other, changing dialects, changing speech rates, things such as that, and what was the cause behind that. However, Howard Giles saw something different. As a college professor, he began to see how people would change the way they communicated with each other in different situations. He refers to communication accommodation theory, or CAT, as I will probably call it a lot more in this presentation because communication accommodation theory is a bit of a mouthful. So he refers to CAT as a framework for explaining why people adapt their communication toward and away from others, and it also explores the social consequences of doing so. This work has now been going on for 35 years. So while this theory is not necessarily a baby, it's not the oldest theory in our textbooks either. So let's get a crash course in the structure of this theory and cover some of the terminology that's used inside of the theory and the principles of it. In Giles' study of accommodation translational research, he breaks accommodation into four main areas: accommodation, under accommodation, over accommodation, and non-accommodation. Let's break those down. Accommodation is when a communication partner will react and relate more interpersonally with the other as a means to make them feel like they are in the group and a part. Over accommodation occurs when people utilize stereotypes when speaking with each other rather than interpersonal interaction to guide their conversation. Counter accommodation, also referred to as non-accommodation, works to highlight the different factors between the two. So it's opposite of accommodation in that they would align. In counter, you would draw the differences between the two. And then under accommodation, also referred to as maintenance, is when the party, the communicator, works to maintain their own identity. Not necessarily become alike or different from, but to maintain. These four areas of accommodation are achieved through three main ideas, which is convergence, divergence, and maintenance. Convergence is simply to converge your communication tactics to become more alike a person. This would usually be done to gain approval or to create identity with a person, where divergence would occur when someone distances themselves from the way others communicate in order to highlight the differences between themselves and their conversation partners. And maintenance is, as we've said before with under accommodation, it is where the communicator works to maintain their own identity. Some examples of when this would happen would be convergence would occur between two new friends who, as they get to know each other, began to act more and more alike the other as a way to align personalities to create identity of this friendship. Divergence might occur when a teacher who has a class not paying attention or feels that they have lost a bit of credibility would choose to then speak over the heads of their students as a means to show a different level of education they themselves have over their students. This divergence would help to create authority, so they're not necessarily connecting with, but they are achieving the goal of the communication. And maintenance is most common with people from different cultures being in a new environment, such as a refugee being sent somewhere else, would fight to maintain their identity and their heritage, not necessarily to be completely different, to show the differences, but to celebrate who they are and to maintain that. Some other terminology you might run across when researching CAT would be that the idea of stances, strategies, and approximations. Approximation is going to get most of the attention, but in stances and strategies you will encounter interpretability, discourse management, and interpersonal control. Interpretability occurs when one interactant attends to the other's interpretive competence or their ability to understand. They work to be interpretable. Discourse management is where one interactant judges and responds to the other's conversational needs. And an interpersonal control, interactants will attend to their personal role in the relationship. Approximation, as I said, will get most of the attention. Approximation, as it is defined by Giles, is an adjustment of communicative features such as accents, speech, rate, pauses, and nonverbal cues used by individuals in order to be more similar or dissimilar to their interactant partner. By this definition, those three terms we covered before, convergence, divergence, and maintenance, would fall under approximations. So there is your crash course and the structure and the ideas behind the CAT theory. So let's look at two specific research projects where this theory was used. The first we'll look at was research done by Huffaker, Schwab, and Derimer. This research looks at online discussions between multiple parties, having the parties communicate at varying emotional levels through messages in an online chat instant messaging situation. In their research, they noticed as one side of the chat was given higher intensity of emotions to communicate, there was a convergence of linguistics to reach common ground, and that the communicators on both sides would begin to converge to try and reach that neutral zone. And this research was beneficial in showing that people really will utilize convergence to create neutrality, to create a like culture, like ideas. A second study we'll look at was done by Rordian. Rordian's research group looked at bending behaviors of a graduate professor who was emailing in correspondence with his students over a certain period of time. As the correspondence continued, there were specific alterations made in the communication and language from the professor. The convergence took place that as the conversations went over time, there was a lowering in the level of academia speech used by the professor as a means to meet his students where they were conversationally in their language use. The researchers also in this report explained that nonverbal communication can also be seen through the length of the messages being sent as well as the time it took for respondents to respond. They also have some research where they show the same thing in instant messaging. It's interesting to see that even in a computer chat, there still are nonverbal communicants in this interpersonal exchange. They can be seen, as said before, in length of messages, time between, but also in things such as punctuations and emoticons. So just another interesting approach to utilizing communication accommodation theory to see how and why people alter the way they are speaking to each other, both verbally and non-verbally, as a means to achieve their communication goals. Some limitations and ideas for future research for this theory could include that the theory is still young, and it could be a good thing because communication technologies are advancing at such rapid rates that it's hard for any specific theory to keep up. But communication accommodation, while it is lacking in areas such as social media, Facebook and Twitter, there are some limitations that there's not much research yet out there on this, but it could be done. Researching the accommodative and converging efforts of people who are trying to reach more followers and gain influence could possibly provide stronger support for the theory and a greater understanding of what's working out there on these medias, but also looking at the consequences of this kind of behavior. Some of the research also indicates that there might be a risk that the more an individual converges in order to gain influence, to gain their original goals of communication, they also run the risk of losing their identity. There's not much research at this time, but there is a great possibility for this to continue. Also, as more and more advertisers are using these communication technologies, it would be interesting to observe how social attractiveness is gained by companies as they build their research, not their research, but their advertisement strategies, because it can be seen more and more that they are using convergence and divergence as a means to reach potential clients and customers on social media. So there is a lot of research that can still be done on this theory. It is young, so it can be manipulated in a way to work with continuing forms of advancement inside communication technology. So today we have looked at the development of communication accommodation theory, or CAT, and how Howard Giles was inspired by the phenomenon he observed to begin developing this research. And then from there we looked at the main principles, kind of boiling it down to the three: convergence, divergence, and maintenance, and looking at how people have already applied this theory to arrive at some interesting and profound research results. And from there we discussed some limitations of current research, as well as a lot of ideas for future research that could be done in this area. I hope that you have enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something from this, and I look forward to reading your comments and as well as looking at the research that you've done. Thank you for watching.